That's what I'm talking about. What's going on, guys, and welcome back to my Expendables review series and prep for the new film, Expendables. I'm going to go through each and every one of them, followed by a ranking of all 4 films, so stay tuned for that. And if you have not checked it out yet, I've already reviewed the first one, which will be in the description down below, so check that out when you can. Thank you so much, guys, for clicking here and watching this. I really do appreciate it, as always. So after one of their own team members are killed, Barney Ross and his team of mercenaries goes on a hunt for revenge and to stop an unexpected threat. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat this at all for you guys. This one is the one that always stood out to me the most. I was, of course, very excited back when this first came out, back when they first advertised it. The first one left such an impression on me, so I already knew what I was getting into. I already knew what to expect, sorta. So I was ready for more. I mean, I was like, bring it! I was just ready to get back in there and just hang out with the whole gang once again. I thought it was a lot better improved. I thought it was a little bit better than the original. I mean, that original film, for what it was good enough for a start. But when they got to the sequel, oh man. As I dive into my positives, I do got to say, the story was much better improved. That was the biggest, weakest link to that first film. The story was just too weak for that one. There wasn't nothing there. But with Expendables 2, they definitely improved in that area. And that just goes to show you that things can improve. You can learn by your mistakes. That wasn't a bad film, the first one. It wasn't terrible. But they just really lacked on certain areas. And in this one, I can already tell you for Expendables 2, they improved 10 times over in just about every way. The story was better. It seemed like it was more focused. It had a much more stronger element. It basically took these guys from that original and put them in a much more dangerous situation. It was much more of a tense situation than with that first film. So you basically have one of the team members who was not amongst them in the first one. It was actually played by Liam Hemsworth, Chris Hemsworth's brother, Thor's brother. A little interesting fact. Who was obviously with them for like the past 6 months before the events of this film started. So he loses his life to these real bad guys, and that sets them off. That sets the rest of the group off. And as Barney says these lines like, track him, find him, kill him, and it just, right then and there, you know that it was personal. And adding on to the story, the kid that was killed, Liam Hemsworth's character, they gave him such a riveting backstory, and the way he tells it, it really makes you feel for what happens later. And it really makes you care for all of the characters, especially Sylvester Stallone and his group, of why they do what they do after what happens to Liam Hemsworth's character, after what happens to him. And it just really dives in deep in that emotional state. Again, just builds up to the story layout that this one brought compared to that first one. It just really makes you feel for the characters, and it really makes you feel for this one kid that is just cut short, and it just sets the tone for the rest of the entire film. Again, that just added on, and it just built on to what a successful film needs. That's another thing that this movie brought. It's more of a personal element to the story. All the more while trying to stop these bad guys from stealing all this plutonium and selling it to bad people that could probably devastate the world. And for action icon stars of this magnitude, it made more sense for Expendables 2. The type of stuff that these guys were being put through differed from that first film. It felt more plausible. It felt more safe, especially for the kind of actors that these guys are. Just putting them through the type of state that they did in Expendables 2, it made so much more sense, and it showed so much full potential than what that first film brought out. It just felt a whole lot safe for the type of guys that these was. And for someone like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and all them, this film felt more like their movies than what that first film did. It brought out so much more potential, which made this movie even more crazier and like better than that first one. And speaking of which, of course, we get returning characters, Sylvester Stallone, Jason Statham, and even Jet Li to a certain extent. You even have Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis in more screen time, which was pretty cool. I mean, even walking into this before it came out, I kind of knew I kind of figured that was going to happen. Like in the first one, Arnold Schwarzenegger was making that transitional phase at the end of his position as governor of California. Well, this actually makes the first film that he's actually been in right after his term ended. So I thought that was a nice treat. And to top it all off, to put icing on the cake, you get Walker Texas Ranger himself, which is another show I need to get back into. I used to watch a lot as a kid. Chuck Norris. You get him in the mix. I mean, could this be any more of an action fan's dream? And another thing that the first one was so weak on, other than the story, was the villains. Here you get Jean-Claude Van Damme, another action star that was big back in the 80s to 90s. He plays a guy named Villain. Irony isn't lost there, isn't it? He basically plays the leader of the Sangs. Really nasty piece of work. Total scumbags. Van Damme triumphed. Van Damme was 10 times better over Eric Roberts and that other dude from the first film. He was ruthless, he was sadistic, everything you'd want in a villain, everything that an Expendables villain should be. But even Scott Adkins, who basically played Van Damme's sidekick, right-hand man, even though he was a sidekick in this film, he was even awesome. He's another one of those actors that's kind of gone on to do his own thing since this film. This is actually the first film of his that I've seen. I don't know if it's the first one that he's actually did, but since then he's gone on to do like mostly VOD stuff. Just straight to VOD and DVD. He was actually in John Wick Chapter 4 here recently, but you wouldn't be able to recognize him in that because he had a lot of prosthetics on, but I knew. Even he was great. He showed just as much intimidation that Van Damme did. And people, that's what you need in a freaking villain. Just 10 times better over those other two guys in the first film. And the writing in this was genius. I think it was even actually better than the first one as well. And actually improved on some of the character developments that a lot of the first one was missing. Like you get this whole scene where Barney is opening up, Sylvester Stallone's character, is opening up to one of his compadres about life and about how he sees life and death and how he wants to keep a safe distance from everybody because everybody he loves and cares about is either dead or gets hurt. And it just really opens up a new can of what this character is, a lot of what the first one was missing. And I liked how they developed this character. It brings you deeper inside this character that you never really got before this. I thought that was a really nice add-in for this film. It just lets you know more of what the kind of person that Stallone's character was, or is. They even give Dolph Lundgren, who was supposedly the traitor in the first, is just basically this really messed up human being in the first one. They actually portrayed him as being smart in one point, and almost to a scientist level. Like him going to all these different schools and Yale, and him just being this really smart person before he went off the rails and became, as Sylvester Stallone calls him, chemically unbalanced. I thought that was a pretty cool trait. I thought that added a nice text to this film. It just made this film all the more interesting with all the character depth levels that they went to. And I can't go without mentioning the funny quips. Like you have all these different scenes, especially by the third act when everything was going down. You have the Terminator, John McClane, and Rambo in one, and then Walker Texas Ranger. And they riff on each other's franchises in a parodied way, in such a cliched way. Yes, I do get that to some people that might be a little annoying, but I think it was done very, very well. I think it was very geniusly written. Like you have Arnold Schwarzenegger saying, "Oh, I'm out of bullets. I'll be back." And then Bruce Willis says, "You've been back enough. I'll be back." And then when he leaves, Arnold Schwarzenegger is like, "Yippee-ki-yay." And then when Chuck Norris shows up and starts shooting, Arnold Schwarzenegger is like, "Who's next? Rambo?" And that was after Sylvester Stallone left to catch up the Van Damme's character. And it's just little moments like that. It just really made this movie even more worthwhile. And I think that's why this one succeeded the most. Because you had all these iconic characters that you grew up with, and they riff on each other's franchises as if it was nothing, but at the same time, it knew what it was doing. it was making fun of them, but at the same time, keeping their memories alive and keeping their franchises alive. And I think that's what that did the most. Again, I know not everybody's going to see it that way, but that's what I thought. And it just made it very interesting. It made it more exciting and more adventurous and more entertaining.
One more! Rest in pieces.
This movie as a whole felt like one of those 80s/90s cliche, but in a good way. Unlike the first one, I felt like this one was better utilized in that sense. It was better utilized in a much smarter way. It just felt like one of those better 80s/90s action extravaganza blowout. It was just done in a much better way, and it was utilized a lot better, and it was just handled a lot better. Again, for the first film starting off with, it wasn't bad, but I think Expendables 2 righted a lot of those wrongs, a lot of those mistakes. That's why I praise this one the most. Because it just pretty much took you back to how action movies kind of was. It just felt a lot more closer to home, and that's why I think this one succeeded the most. As you probably guessed it, I have no discrepancies against this film. It was a fun, kick-ass ride, and I enjoyed myself even after watching it, probably going on the 1,000th time since it came out. I still enjoy it to this day, and probably will until the day I die. This is the perfect sequel to a fair enough first film that it deserves to be on a pedestal. So the Expendables 2, what was your thoughts on it? Were you a fan of this particular entry? Were you somebody like me who praised this the most? Or was this not for you? Which is completely fine. Are you somebody that praised the first one over this one? Leave your comment down below and give me your thoughts. Thank you so much guys for watching this. I really do appreciate it. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. And make sure to click that bell icon and set it to all so you don't miss a thing. And I will see you on the next one. Peace.